Do you love movies? So do I. What's up, y'all? It's KB, and I love movies, inviting you to listen to The Conversation, a film podcast where passion meets perspective and opinion. From the old school to the new, I invite a guest on to discuss the movies that thrill us, challenge us, break our hearts, or even blow our minds. There's always new episodes dropping wherever you get your podcasts. So join the conversation. We don't just watch movies. We love talking about them too. The Conversation with KB Loves Movies, a part of Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Hello, this is Chris Haskell from They Live by Film. For those that don't know us, Adam, Zach, and I, we built a podcast over the last 2 years that's a combination of film discussion from 3 very different perspectives, as well as industry interviews with the leaders in boutique Blu-ray and 4K community. We started with Deaf Crocodile, but over time we've been lucky enough to speak with Arrow Video, Severin, Mondo Macabro, Vinegar Syndrome, Radiance, Indicator, most of the OCN partner labels. It's been a blast. You can find us wherever you podcast, and also actually recently as part of Someone's Favorite Production podcast network. We hope to see you online.
I died for you, Doc.
Welcome to Wake Up Heavy, the world's greatest horror movie podcast. On this episode, my weird dad and his friends will be talking about
Dead of Night. The story of one night in a small town that changed the lives of many and ended the lives of some. As night fell, something evil descended upon the town. Something corrupt, unspeakable. Behind their drawn curtains, they waited as fear walked in the dead of night. The boy went away to fight a war. The man came back. But something came with him. Something unspeakable. Dead of Night, starring Academy Award winners John Marney and Lynn Carter. Due to the importance of the first 5 minutes of Dead of Night, audiences will not be seated after the beginning of the picture.
I have to say, Mark, I very much enjoy having talked about all of these Ormsby and Clark films because of all the familiar faces I see as I go through these.
Recently, for whatever reason, I've watched Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things multiple times. Like, we just watched it again on Halloween, and I totally forgot that Joanne, the girlfriend, is the main lady from Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, and the theater troupe leader is that random guy he talks to after the doctor has been killed.
Yeah, that's Ormsby himself.
It's like, whoa. Oh, yes, that's right.
And then I want to say the guy who says, I peed myself, he's in here too, and I can't remember if he's the bartender or if he's the deputy or the sheriff.
Jeff Gillen is the bartender with the nuptials line, and Bob Clark is the sheriff with the cool Elvis shades.
That's why he looks familiar.
Look at this. Look what they're putting in the paper. Miss Sandra Pitt West and Mr. Montgomery Hunt have announced their forthcoming nuptials. I mean, ain't that a bitch, Mr. B, putting a thing like that in the paper?
My.
Anyway, 10 to 1 says they already got their nuptials in the backseat of his car.
They look very similar, and in one of those extras that you sent over, Mike, somebody's talking about Bob Clark.
Mm-hmm.
And the image on the screen is a picture of Jeff Gillen.
Amazing.
These are the extras that are on the Blu-ray or whatever. And I'm like, whoops. They both have that kind of curly, kinky hair and
right
on the larger side. So it tracks, but it's kind of funny.
Andy, there isn't any heartbeat, Doc. No heartbeat.
Hello, and welcome to Wake Up Heavy Recollections of Horror. This is Mark Bigley, your host. Joining me once again from the Projection Booth podcast is Mike White.
Hello.
And returning to the show, one of the hosts of Twitch of the Death Nerve, Samm Deighan.
Hello.
On this third and final episode of the Alan Ormsby-Bob Clark series, we are discussing Deathdream, which was filmed on the heels of Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things in 1972, but not released until 1974, after Deranged. Bob Clark directs from a script by Ormsby, who once again creates the makeup effects with help of first-timer Tom Savini. Deathdream, aka Dead of Night, aka The Night Andy Came Home, et al., is the story of Andy Brooks, played by Richard Backus, who is killed in Vietnam but willed back to life and back home by his grief-stricken mother. As with most monkey's paw-inspired tales, this does not bode well for Andy or those he cares about. Also starring John Marley and Lynn Carlin as Andy's parents, Anya Ormsby as his sister, and Jane Daly, from Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, as his old girlfriend. Ormsby, Clark, and Jeff Gillen all have cameos. So Mike, when was the first time you saw Deathdream, and what did you think?
I want to say that the first time I saw it was taped off of cable, and I do mean taped, maybe on AMC back when they used to show movies without commercials, and they were kind of the TCM of the day. I'm really glad that you brought up Monkey's Paw, which I don't think is that tough to come to, but it's interesting that this was coming out, well, being made in 72, right? And there's that Tales from the Crypt movie, I want to say, that was also 72 that has a Monkey's Paw story in it. So I was getting them confused quite a bit. When I went back and rewatched this, I was like, oh yeah, this is the one where the mom wishes him back and he's in agony because he's filled with embalming fluid. No, that's not this movie. It didn't make that much of an impression on me the first time, obviously, but I really enjoyed it watching it the second time. I'm very glad to have watched this again recently, and it's terrific.
And Sam, how about you?
I saw this, I want to say, on a bootleg tape when I was in high school because I just instantly fell in love with Black Christmas. Once I put together that it was the same Bob Clark as A Christmas Story, my teenage brain was blown. I thought, okay, I have to try and find as many of his movies as possible, which I want to say I saw some like weird cut version or version that may have been slightly shorter. Either that or my memory is just skewed, but it was nothing like I was expecting it to be, and I just immediately fell in love with it. At the same time, within the same couple months that I first saw Martin, I'm one of those people who, and I don't want to, start an argument in the beginning of your episode here, but I was obsessed with Dawn of the Dead as a kid and think Night of the Living Dead is a great film. But I have never really been super into Romero as a director, and Martin is one of those movies that I just expected I would love, but was disappointed by. And so when I saw Deathdream, this was the movie that I think I wanted Martin to be. Just the way that he combines that family drama with the horror movie tropes and the way he adapted The Monkey's Paw, I think this is a perfect film, and I love it.
That whole Martin thing came up the last two times I watched it, and I'm glad you brought it up, and hopefully we'll talk a little bit more about it later, because I get the same kind of feeling from both films. Luckily for me, I know exactly the first time I watched this, because I had a Facebook memory pop up yesterday.
Love that.
Of me exclaiming that I finally get to watch Deathdream because it was playing on TCM on November 29th, 2014. And I had been trying to track this movie down since I read about it in the Psychotronic Encyclopedia film nearly 30 years ago. Like Mike, I was a little bit underwhelmed the first time. I think I was expecting something a little bit different. I wasn't anticipating that heavy family drama. I think I thought it was going to be something more like early Cronenberg, where it's kind of way out there and shocking and maybe more on the exploitation side than it is. I left it cold, but there was that kernel there, and every time I would watch something like Black Christmas or another Bob Clark film, I'd go, I really need to give Deathdream another chance, and I would like it more each time because I had those expectations now gone, and I could just get the vibe of what they were going for, which is very different than what I was expecting, and that's no fault of theirs, obviously. It's become, I think, of this trio of movies that we've done, this is definitely my favorite of the three.
Well, it definitely feels like the most mature of the three, which is interesting since it's not that much after Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things. There's kind of that jokey quality to Deranged, that whole thing that we were talking about with the narrator, where he just kind of shows up. I mean, I said last time I was laughing out loud when that would happen. This one just feels very mature. It feels really relevant to the time and then also still today. And seeing it now, I mean, I don't think I think about the use of the needle with the blood as much when it comes to intravenous drug use, though when he uses the stethoscope to tie himself off, I'm like, okay, yeah, definitely we're looking at that. I know a lot of people came back from Vietnam really fucked up, really heavily, using drugs. I know my own father, when he came back from Vietnam, was really into pot, obviously a lot better than being hooked on heroin, but this really just speaks to PTSD so perfectly, and to be able to do that in 1972, coming out in 74, I mean, there weren't a lot of movies about Vietnam while Vietnam was happening, and to make this while the war was still going on, really kind of brave, and then really just hits hard with how messed up this guy is when he comes back home. Don't even think about him as a literal zombie, just a figurative zombie, just sitting there. The family doesn't know how to react to him. They try to get on with their lives and be all normal and, let's go out to the drive-in kind of thing. And this guy completely just that, the 3,000-yard stare. He's content to sit in his rocking chair and not do anything. And I'm like, that's probably how it was for a lot of people when their sons would come home from Vietnam.
That's also why I connected with it so deeply as a teenager, because to me, I'm not a war veteran, but I'm a trauma survivor, and his whole arc that he goes through where his parents are disappointed because he's not the same. And I feel like the movie really nails that sense of like when something so awful happens to you, you're not the same person and you wish you were dead. And that gutting scene at the end when the place that he takes his mother is the cemetery and like he's written this tombstone for himself, it portrays him as monstrous and like as a ghoul or as a zombie in such a unique way, because he's violent, and like when he kills the dog, it's horrifying.
Oh my god, yeah.
In front of the kids, no less. But
dead things shouldn't play with children.
But it has those moments, exactly like you were just saying, where like in Deranged and Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, there are these almost more like comedic moments of horror or violence, and I feel like the dog killing scene or even the doctor killing scene, if it was shot a different way, it would feel just like those, which would have been great. But this is like just is so intense, and it's like even though he's doing these horrible things, you can tell that he's in so much pain. It's gutting.
As I was watching it today, I really got that feeling that even if he wasn't one of the living dead or a returned corpse, everything that he does, every reaction that he has is what you would expect from a returning soldier with PTSD. The other stuff fits the movie, obviously, as a horror film, but you could film this just straight without any of that and have a profile of a traumatized soldier. Towards the end of the film, when they're on that double date and he's with his old girlfriend and his sister and her boyfriend, him pulling his hand away from his old girlfriend, he's worried about the open sores on his arm, but you could just see a soldier who doesn't want human interaction doing the same thing. And that really, really hit me this time, is you could strip all the horror elements out and have this really gut-wrenching drama. And again, that's kind of what I wasn't expecting from what I thought would be one of those fun 70s exploitation films.
No fun here.
No.
In my early 20s, I went to this gorgeous 35mm screening of Cassavetes' Faces. And it was just like a random choice for me. I knew who Cassavetes was by reputation, but I hadn't seen any of his films. No idea what to expect. I was like, holy shit, here are the parents from Deathdream. For anyone who hasn't seen Faces, it's this really harrowing, long, intimate portrait of a marriage crumbling, and John Marley and Lynn Carlin again play this husband and wife. They're not parents in the film. Their relationship dynamic, it's almost like Deathdream the early years. And
before the kids came along.
Yes, before Andy came along. And Kathy. I can't forget Kathy, because, you know, her mother tries to forget about her plenty.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
I decided it just stuck in my head, this idea of two actors playing two different but similar roles in two totally different movies. Like, it felt like such a weird, unique, cinematic hiccup, but I couldn't stop thinking about it, so I did a double feature of Deathdream and Faces, and wow, was it brutal. Never again.
Oh, man. That's a fun evening.
Yeah. It does really have that element that so many horror genre movies lack, and that I think a lot of horror genre fans look down on, is that kind of family melodrama that, for whatever reason, I love. It's becoming, or has become, more accepted because of filmmakers like Douglas Sirk and Fassbinder and people who are making equally harrowing movies about families without zombies. But yeah, when I was rewatching it today, the point that you just made sort of stuck in my head. If you edited out certain scenes, this would just be a movie not about a zombie, but about a vet who comes back and has such extensive trauma that he starts killing people and shooting up drugs, and it would feel like things like Panic in Needle Park, where it's just, here's this harrowing real-life situation.
Both the parents and the sister, they have no idea how to handle it, and the mother's reaction to the whole thing, very different from the father and from the sister. It feels so well drawn. The characters are so well drawn. And then, to have these real powerhouse actors in here. And of course, I think of John Marley as being Jack Woltz from The Godfather, who just plays it at 11 the whole time. To see him in here not playing it at that level, but that he can get there, it's like, oh man, this guy's gonna crack.
You're waiting for it.
You're totally waiting for it, and I'm like, is that gonna happen? It's basically like, not only do you have Andy there as a powder keg, but then you've got the father as a powder keg for me. I'm just like, oh man, he can reach those heights. I wonder if he's going to get to that level or not. I don't know if he necessarily does, but he holds it together barely holding it together. It feels like his whole world is crashing apart. When he witnesses his son kill the dog, you can see the terror on his face and the confusion. What has happened to my boy?
The ending that the film gives him is so... Every time I watch this movie, I forget that it's coming somehow, and it's just brutal.
Yeah.
Like, I can't really think of, and I'm sure there are examples that just aren't coming to mind, but I can't think of many other horror movies that make the violence, maybe not the portrayal of violence, but like the decision to commit acts of violence feel so grounded in reality that this movie has. Like, especially other zombie movies, there's nothing really like this.
That rage that Andy expresses throughout the whole movie, and Mike, I hadn't really thought about the father's rage, but he just directs it into the bottle for the better half of the movie. I hadn't really picked up on how much poor Catherine is just tossed aside, literally at one point, by her dad.
It's awful.
Daddy, what's the matter?
Well, mind your own goddamn business.
The mom, I completely missed that she basically has no interest in her and says as much at the end, like,
I don't care about Catherine.
I only care about Andy. And
it's so awful.
It feels so real.
It does, and I love the way that they're really subtle about letting that side of the family dynamic come through, because most of it is in the third act, where you start to get those lines where Lynn Carlin says, she's your daughter, or something to that effect. You two were always close, and Andy and I were close. You get that there's this acceptance of that, but also jealousy and resentment. Does she not care about the daughter because she's so obsessed with Andy, or is she resentful that the daughter is so close? Like, poor Kathy. She tries so hard.
Well, and it's interesting to compare her performance in this to her performance in Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things. And I think Heather brought that up on that episode, where she's that trippy goth girl in that movie, and then just this bedraggled, I don't know if she's the younger sister. You get that feeling that she's the younger, and all the attention was poured onto Andy, at least by the mom.
But she seems so normal here. It took me a couple watches to realize that it was the same actress.
And she really didn't do that much beyond these two films. I think she has maybe 7 or 8 credits on IMDb, and it's sort of a shame. And that kind of goes for a number of the people that were in that troupe of Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things.
She's Alan Ormsby's wife, right? Or was.
I'm not sure when they got divorced. He's married to another actress now who's been in some great 70s horror films and things, and I can't remember the gal's name. It's interesting, going back to that Ormsby basically hated his performance in Children and never really acted anymore either, because, we were just gushing about him on that episode.
Yeah.
He gets his little cameo in on this.
He's great in that, and I think it's so stereotypical of the, stuck-up avant-garde theater troupe director who has this set idea that his vision is brilliant and really has no respect for human life or the people working with him. Because I've now seen that so many times and love it so much, it's hard for me to see him and not think of that performance. When he pops up here, okay, when are you going to say something arrogant, though?
Right.
You're being too down to earth.
Did you just get off the boat back from the island? How did this work?
And as far as a first-time script, it's pretty... they both play to their strengths here, where you can see the clunkiness maybe of the script for Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, which is mostly credited to Clark, but the direction is interesting. Ormsby with the sole credit on this, and Clark being director, it's like they found their niche, and that's where they would both go from there. A while back, when I first had the idea for doing this series and wanted to catch up on the movies, I watched them all and ended with this one and thought, it seems like they're directing their films to the exploitation market, but they're just too darn smart. This is such a smart film. That's what constantly throws me off about it. And you have the goofiness of Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, the real goofiness of Deranged, and then this really super straight film. I think it just goes to show the talent that these two guys had and where it would obviously take them in the future.
I don't want to gush, but for me, if you're teaching a class on zombies or horror films, which I know there are plenty of classes like that, this should be part of the curriculum. This feels very essential, and this is where a lot of great ideas all come together at one point. I don't know why this isn't a bigger film than it is. It took me so many years to hear about it, much less watch it. It's one hell of a movie, and it just hits on every single mark. There's not a point where I'm just like, I wish it didn't have this scene, or, it gets goofy here, or anything. It just feels so well put together from start to finish. And it moves at a really good pace, too.
That's the thing that constantly surprises me. With all three of the films that you've been talking about, the number of people I know who like some pretty cult horror movie titles who haven't seen these or don't realize that they were all made with the involvement of Bob Clark. It's like everybody knows Black Christmas, but I guess it just doesn't occur to people, you should go and seek out if this person has made any other horror movies. And maybe that's because people have realized he also directed A Christmas Story. Although I still meet people who are like, what?
Right.
It's like, why is Bob Clark such a gray area? The way my brain works and the way I, especially when I was younger, wanted to be a completist. And if I liked one of somebody's films, or if I loved one of somebody's films, I would try to see what else they made. I feel like for the number of people I know who absolutely love Black Christmas, and deservedly, it's like, why haven't you seen Deathdream? And I think, to your point earlier, it hasn't always been easy to find, but there is a beautiful Blu-ray now.
Well, and some of the marketing of it is kind of weird. Like that poster where it's the negative, the blue negative Dead of Night poster. It just looks a little goofy. And there's the one, like, Mark, you're using it for your icon, where it looks like an Italian exploitation film, you know?
Yeah, it looks like an action film.
Yeah, and you even, because you got John Marley with a gun, Andy with the dark glasses and black gloves. I'm like, what is this, a giallo? What is this thing?
Yeah, he definitely looks like, especially when he has, by the end, the gloves and the sunglasses on, he looks like he should be in Kraftwerk or something. Like, we're about to get into that territory. Or, like, the way people are dressed in Der Fan.
Right. There's another one, too, where it's like a red version of his face, and he's got blood coming out the corners of his mouth, and he has this horrible grimace, and he's got a needle in his hand. And I'm like, that's kind of the movie, but not really. What are you doing?
You're missing the point.
I don't know how I would properly market this thing, but not with these images.
That's the problem with these sorts of more genre skirting movies is, do you market this as a drama and horrify people who think they're going to see this like harrowing movie about a vet returned home? Or I think because marketing attempts to dumb down things often, there are certain movies that you just... Also, with this, I feel like it's so much better to go in cold.
They usually try to find that lowest common denominator to get as many either cars in the drive-in or butts in the seats, and it's sort of tough to do with this one, I think, a little bit. I think I forgot to mention that, like you, Sam, the Bob Clark connection was a big pull for me when I read about Black Christmas, and then, oh wait, there's these other 2 or 3 films too, and because at that point I loved A Christmas Story, and this was sort of before the 24-hour thing and all that, like I mentioned on one of the other episodes. But I never understood why that was a bomb at the theater, because I saw it probably for the first time on TV and was like, this is delightful. Why don't people like this movie?
Wait, A Christmas Story was a bomb?
Yeah.
As far as I remember.
What?
Because I was cognizant of when it came out, and I remember it getting really bad reviews and not doing well. Maybe I'm making that up.
How can you disrespect Darren McGavin like that? Jesus.
I think you're right. I don't think that it was very well received. I was very fortunate. I saw it theatrically, and I was like, this is great. And I never realized that not everybody loved that movie.
That's psychotic. But can you imagine?
Budget 3.3 million, box office 20.6, which is really fair.
Yeah.
Maybe it was critically lambasted. I'll have to take a look. It might have been.
I mean, I do think there are periods where critics don't want to like feel-good mainstream things because it's, not cool enough or not artsy enough. It must be a pretty wild experience as a director to have one of your movies become so beloved that it's played 24 hours every year on a major holiday.
It sounds like it was released a week before Thanksgiving in 1983, earned $2 million the first weekend. Ebert gave it 4 stars, but then Canby in the New York Times gave it a mostly negative review. By Christmas 1983... Is it
because Ralphie's knees are too fat?
Yeah, it could be. It could be. Let's see. The movie's big comic pieces tend only to be exceedingly busy, though Mr. Billingsley, Mr. Gavin, which is, sick, Miss Dillon, and the actress who plays Ralphie's school teacher are all very able. They are less funny than the actors in a television situation comedy. Ouch.
Wow, that's just bitchy.
Yeah. By 4 weeks later, by Christmas 83, the film was no longer playing at most venues.
Wow.
So, yeah, just kind of, and then remained in about 100 theaters until January of 84, and then it was done.
That's
thank God for TV, Some of these movies get resurrected, and that was the thing that was mentioned in the Psychotronic Encyclopedia film, is like your best bet is to catch this on a late-night horror program because you're probably not going to see it any other way. Simon relates some of that mishandling of distribution on all 3 of the films.
Yeah.
And how they just quickly came and went for the most part.
Well, if I ever own a TV station, which that will never happen, but if I ever own a TV station, I'm going to show Deathdream for 24 hours on Veterans Day.
There you go.
You're welcome, Bob Clark.
And that makes me think of the opening of the film, since it was tacked on, and the confusion that created that I never realized was confusing until Simon brought it up. And I guess I just took it as that we were seeing all of this from Andy's point of view, even that guy getting shot, because we start off with POV, if I'm not mistaken, and then Darren gets killed, who the postman brings up later.
Right.
Hey, Andy, you was over there with old Darren Wilson, wasn't you? How is old Darren?
So I just figured, this was just another soldier, and we don't know what happens to Andy. Is he dead? Because he does come back home. I hadn't noticed until these recent viewings that all of that stuff happens on the same night, supposedly, and that is a little bit disorienting. We see those scenes of Andy getting killed, and this just could be the way it was edited, but we see him getting killed, and we have that real creepy whispering over the top of that.
You can't die. You can't die.
And then it seems like that cuts into them at dinner time that same evening when they're praying, and she's mumbling those same words. And I'm like, okay, are we supposed to assume that he's killed at the same time as she's praying at the dinner table for his safe return? Or maybe this is just some funky editing, because the rest of the story does happen the same night, as far as them getting the telegram, Andy taking the ride from the truck driver, and then returning home.
I never thought about it that way. I just sort of assumed it was POV and he died, and then at some undisclosed later time, because his mother prayed so hard, that was what brought him back. That creepy scene where John Marley goes to go to bed and she's just sitting in his bedroom in the rocking chair in the dark with the candle lit.
Yeah.
It's like, ooh.
You're all right. I can tell. You're alive. I know it.
It makes you start to see right from the get-go in some pretty subtle ways that not everything is right with this family, because she's so obsessed with him returning and is in such deep denial. That's what lets things get so far out of control in a way, because they're not... The father seems to recognize from much earlier on that things aren't right. And of course he sees him kill the dog. She just has such large blinders on. How did she get to that point where she cares so little about the rest of her life that it's fine if her son kills her daughter, if her husband kills himself? That part's pretty brutal as well.
So I feel pretty dumb because until I read Simon Fitzjohn's book, I didn't realize that it was a different actor playing Andy in those Vietnam scenes. Okay, yeah. Good. I'm glad it wasn't just me, because I was like, well, it's kind of dim. He's got a helmet on. A lot of him is out of focus. So I didn't really even realize. I just kind of assumed. I didn't picture that it was the same night just because...
Yeah, me neither.
If it's daytime in Vietnam, it's going to be night in the U.S. and vice versa. So I was like, yeah, okay. I just assumed it was pretty shortly thereafter. Like the body was still warm kind of thing.
He's got to get shipped home.
Yeah.
It didn't make sense, but it just, the editing in that one scene threw me off these last couple times I watched it. And I told Simon, I'm like, I never even noticed that it was a different guy or that was supposed to be him. You could have not told me that. I would have been just fine.
I'm going to forget that information.
Yeah.
On the extras you sent, Mike, they have the test footage of him. He does fine in the normal scenes of him being a normal guy with the neighbor kids, and he does a commendable job, but that 1,000-yard stare and that seething anger comes through really well with Richard Backus.
He's so good in this, though. That scene when there's the first awkward confrontation after he comes home, they're happy to see him and he's like kind of numb but seems to be happy. But then there's that line of dialogue where she says, or one of the parents says,
I mean, they actually sent us a telegram telling us that you were killed.
They actually said that my son was dead. I was.
Totally deadpan, and then he just starts smiling and laughing, and it's like, what's happening here? He's so good.
That smile after he says that.
It's chilling.
Yeah, completely.
But it also sort of makes me think of something like, and I know this is a really weird far jump, I rewatched the Buffy the Vampire Slayer show at the beginning of quarantine, and there's this one season where she dies and her friends bring her back, and she comes back different. She's depressed. She doesn't want to be there. Her whole vibe is, she's not a zombie and is not doing the same sorts of things as Andy, but that unemotional, not able to relate to regular life anymore, coming back from the dead. For some reason, it made me think of that, like, oh, am I supposed to just act like everything's normal?
Well, as Jed Crandall would say,
it's Judd, not Jed, Mark, and he would say,
well, sometimes that is better.
Yes. I think that's also what Andy would say.
Yeah. The whole monkey's paw thing, and it's an interesting concept to me and always has been. Probably why Pet Sematary is my favorite Stephen King book. I think we had to read Monkey's Paw I want to say in either high school or one of my early college courses. But anytime you get that wish fulfillment gone wrong or dead person came back and they're not the same, I really dig my claws into those.
And this is such a great take on that, because it's like you're getting the thing that you really wanted, but in the worst way possible.
And I kind of like that he's not possessed by an evil from a Indian burial ground or something, or Native American burial ground, sorry. He's himself, but he's just wrong. I like that he's a zombie who can walk and talk and smile and be creepy as fuck, but he knows that he shouldn't be there. And that's what I really appreciate. And then his whole need for blood, I was like, oh, that's really nice. And yeah, like you said, it did remind me of Martin as well. This whole idea of kind of a vampire, kind of a zombie. Chris Stashu and I talked recently about The Revenant, which kind of has a similar thing to it as well. Not the DiCaprio film, but the 2009 film, where it's like he's back from the dead. He's a soldier back from, in that case, Iran or Iraq. He's back here and he needs to drink blood. He is very much a zombie who also needs to drink blood. So it's like, okay, well, this is kind of cool. And yeah, this is very much a precedent, I think, for that film. And I like that it doesn't have to be very strict as far as like, well, you're a zombie, you only want to eat brains, you're not intelligent, these kind of things. That he has that thirst for blood and that he's trying to, I guess, keep his shit together by having blood, but it's just not working the way that he deteriorates. And I love the makeup effects. I love how he deteriorates, and especially towards the end when he just gets worse and worse and worse very rapidly.
That goes back to what I was saying earlier about how this film makes the violence really grounded in a way that so many other horror movies aren't, but Martin does the same thing, where it's like, okay, what are the actual practical issues around eating flesh or drinking blood? There's nothing supernatural going on here where he grows these fangs or he suddenly has so much power in his jaw that he can just rip through people. It's like he actually has to go through the trouble of killing people and extracting their blood, at least for most of the film.
And then that ties into like heroin usage. It's like, wow, that's really super clever.
The fact that they take the time to show him tying off his arm and injecting the blood, like he could have just squirted the blood in his mouth, or, you know, they could have handled it so many other ways. It makes it so much more harrowing. Also, I'm sure you guys have talked about this on some of the other episodes, but my favorite thing about all three of these films, or like these three films as a unit, is probably the score and the sound design, which is just, they do so much with so little. And it's something that I really noticed this time around rewatching Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, just how important that score is. And here, it's the same, even with the sounds. So it's like, it seems like his only hobby is sitting in a rocking chair and just making that rocking sound that drives John Marley nuts.
Gruesome homicide in US 7 and Barkham Road, south of Brookville. Howard Stewart, a 36-year-old truck driver, was found dead in his truck. His throat concussed.
It does become so ominous. And then later in the film, when his dad goes to the police station and is finally like, okay, I need to fess up, and the deputy is just like playing with the shade.
What the hell are you doing?
It's making such a similar sound.
That was very Lynch, yeah, especially to take place in a police station.
It's great though, but it's like there are so many things with the sound design to influence mood in a way that bigger, more mainstream Hollywood productions would do with like an orchestral score. Here, it's like, let's just rake our fingernails down some piano wire and have this guy rocking in a rocking chair.
The sounds on the piano strings were really effective. And I mean, I know Mark will talk when we talk about Black Christmas, how they use the deconstruction of the piano for that. But yeah, with this one, I was like, Wow, this is really super creepy sound effects. These are or soundtrack. This is fantastic.
And it's kind of grating, too. It's another thing that sets you on edge. It almost doesn't even sound like piano wires. It just sounds kind of like metal, like scrape on metal. And then the skittering violins. There's that kind of droney, I don't know if it's a woodwind instrument or something. That's really creepy. But at the beginning there, along with the whispers, there's that wind. It sounds like the fake wind that's blowing during a lot of the scenes in Eraserhead, and that always puts me on edge. That overwhelming sound of Eraserhead, and this has it in a number of scenes.
It's also wild that in Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, a lot of those like ominous atmospheric sounds give it this like real over-the-top gothic horror movie vibe, which is great because that's how the film looks. It's, we're on this island with this cemetery and 8 million fog machines. But here, it's like you're hearing similar sounds, but you're in this typical suburban house that's meant to look like it's like the perfect American family. But there's creepy whispering.
Yeah. Lots of creepy whispering.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that Lynch connection, but it's another movie that would make, because my brain likes to try to pair things or put things into groups, you could definitely do this as a wild double feature with Fire Walk with Me or something. Or, like, don't go in that house.
I got a phone. It's got a little ring.
We're going to take a quick break here and play the third and final installment of my interview with Simon Fitzjohn, the author of I'm Going to Kill You, a book on the films of Bob Clark.
It's Andy.
Oh, God! No! It's a lie! It's a lie! It's a lie! It's a lie!
Here's what some people are saying about the Projection Booth podcast.
The Projection Booth is single-handedly the greatest film podcast you could ever listen to or could possibly want.
Top notch. 5 stars. This has quickly become one of my favorite film-related podcasts. Always interesting.
A completely unpretentious yet fully comprehensive look at films from all genres.
The Projection Booth podcast, with new episodes available every week at projectionboothpodcast.com.
Here's your tea, Andy.
Nothing for me, thanks.
So that brings us back around, going backwards in time to Deathdream, which, as I've already mentioned, was filmed pretty close in succession with Children, but came out after Deranged. And we've got Quadrant Films, again, Canadian company, backing the film, I think, based on either the success or just how well Children turned out. Yes. And this is what leads a lot of people, including myself, who has made this mistake, into thinking that Bob Clark was a Canadian filmmaker, because he did utilize that tax credit system.
Yes.
And if I remember correctly, did become a Canadian citizen.
That's a very good. Yes, probably people who call him Canadian are quite within their rights to call him Canadian, aren't they? Yeah, the other thing I would add about Quadrant, Mark, is that one of the main guys in Quadrant, I think it was 3 guys, but one of them was an English guy called Peter James, who I'm not sure if you've heard of, but he is a very successful crime novelist now. He still churns out a few books every year that become bestsellers over here, and he's had stuff converted into TV series over here. He was somehow working with these couple of Canadian guys and launched Quadrant, and he absolutely loved Bob Clark, loved him. I've interviewed Peter, I interviewed him when I was putting my book together, and he was gushing about how he got on with Bob, because Bob just had this enthusiasm. So when you met him, it was like, well, we can do this, we can do this, we can do this, we can do that. We just need a chance and we just need a bit of money. He was a very good salesman. So suddenly you have Quadrant coming in, giving him $235,000 for a film to say, well, there you go. what have you got? They didn't even really say, well, it needs to be about this or it needs to be about that. They just gave them the money and said, well, come up with an idea for us.
Mm-hmm. And where did the idea for Deathdream come from?
Yeah, the idea had been knocking around with Alan Ormsby, for a good number of years. So he had come up with this idea that he originally envisioned as a play, a stage play called The Veteran. So the same sort of idea as Deathdream, Vietnam vet gets killed, his mum can't accept the fact, does this vigil, in effect almost wills him back to life, or, life in quote marks.
Mm-hmm.
So he wrote it in the 60s. Alan had been working on this using Monkey's Paw. I think there was a Bertolt Brecht play that he used as inspiration. So lots of inspiration, and came up with this thing called The Veteran. And then suddenly when Quadrant came in and said, well, here's $250,000. What have you got for us? Bob and Alan were like, well, hang on, what about that script you've got that you were working on? Alan went back and then rewrote a film script based around it called The Night Walker. That was the original title for it. Wrote it in 2 weeks. You can watch it as a straight horror film if you want, or if you want a little bit more meat on the bones, you can look at it and say, this is saying a hell of a lot about the Vietnam War, the treatment of American soldiers coming back from Vietnam, how people came back from Vietnam and how that had affected them. You can read into it so much. And, Bob and Alan both said they weren't going to be banging the drum about, look at the subtext, people, look at the subtext, but it's there, isn't it? It is clearly there. You have this guy, Andy, the son, who comes back almost soulless. He comes back without any emotion because he's been shot, and that we see in the prologue. But the message they're trying to get across is that he's almost been desensitized by what's happened in Vietnam, and this is what was happening across America.
Mm-hmm.
With these soldiers coming back, these 18, 19-year-olds coming back ruined sort of mentally because of what happened to them out there, but nobody wanted to talk about it. There's this great scene, isn't there, earlier on in the film where Andy has come back and he's sat out in the garden with the family, and the local postman comes along, who's this World War II vet, and he's banging on about how, the good old days, and about how World War II was great, and we're all celebrated, and it's just a culture clash. Andy decides the best thing he can do is strangle the family's dog to get his frustration out with it. One of the kids in that scene actually is Alan Ormsby's son. So that was what they came up with the script. 2 weeks, A Night Walker. It then became Dead of Night, which was the title it was released under. Most people know it as Deathdream because that's what it was re-released under. I remember when it first came out on DVD, it was released as Deathdream. It had other titles. The Night Andy Came Home was one, with Whispers, Donors, which I thought was a clever title for the film when you consider, what Andy does to quote unquote stay alive in the film. But I think Alan actually came out and said he doesn't think they've ever come up with the right title for the film, because he said even Deathdream, well, it's not a dream.
Right.
It's not a dream, it's happening. So what's Deathdream? What does that mean? Dead of Night? Well, that okay, but that doesn't really say anything.
And it's been used. How many other movies have that title? This just came to my mind, actually, as you were saying that. I remember reading that, Ormsby's critique of Deathdream, but you could almost take that and turn the movie into something else where, almost Jacob's Ladder-esque, where we have seen the prologue, we know that Andy dies, the rest of the film could be his death dream.
Him dreaming about him coming back home.
Yeah, it's kind of an awful dream.
You're the first person that's raised that as a possibility, Mark, and now damn you, because it means I'll have to go and watch the film again, which is no hardship, let's be honest. But and say, right, would that actually work as an idea? It may well do. The crazy thing about Deathdream, of course, and you will have spotted this, everybody who's watched Deathdream will have spotted this, is the first thing that throws you in the film is you get the prologue where Andy is shot in Vietnam, some bushes in America somewhere, where he's shot. He comes back, doesn't he? After the candlelit vigil, you're not dead, willing him back. And then he turns up hitchhiking his way back home. And you think, well, hang on a second, that's not the guy I just saw being shot in Vietnam. That's a completely different guy. So who the hell was the guy I saw shot in Vietnam, and what's he got to do with anything? Why that happened was the footage, the Vietnam prologue wasn't in the original cut of the film. They originally, when they were casting for the role of Bandy, they had a whole host of people come in for it. Richard Backus obviously got the role. And I think what was brilliant was he said about it, when I interviewed him, he had so many stories, but one of my favorites for him was he said his audition was to come in a room, sit down in a chair and stare angrily at a lampshade without talking and just say, look at that lampshade as though you hate it. And they were like, right, you've got the part. Because he did such a good job, because he doesn't talk much in the film, does he? It's mostly stares and physical more than dialogue for him. But another guy that tested for the part was an actor called Gary Swanson, who they didn't give the part to. But what happened was they filmed this in autumn 72. Then it started shipping the footage off to Quadrant and editing it and that sort of thing. Quadrant came back and said, well, hang on, we need a bit more here. You know, you're saying that he shot in Vietnam and died in Vietnam. We want to see him die in Vietnam. So you need to go back and shoot some stuff that's meant to be in Vietnam and put it at the start of the film. And so they were like, right, okay, we can do that. So they had to go back in February 73, a couple of months after they finished, and do these reshoots with this Vietnam footage. But Richard Backus wasn't available. He was working on another project, so they couldn't use him. So they were like, right, well, what can we do here? So almost Plan 9 from Outer Space when Bela Lugosi died style. They go to Gary Swanson and say, well, actually, do you want to be in this film after all? Because if so, you can be Andy in this Vietnam sequence we're doing, where you've basically just got to be shot. And so that's why you would literally have two actors playing the same part, or what's meant to be the same part, purely because it had to be done as a reshoot. So
I don't think I've ever noticed.
If you watch it again, you will.
Yeah,
you know,
now I will, for sure.
When you watch it as many times as I had to do, you know, for the book, I'm thinking,
right,
oh, who the hell is this meant to be at the start here? Because that's not Richard Backus. So is that a different? Is the person he's falling on Richard? I was just confused by it all. Deathdream is a step up for Bob and Alan. You think suddenly they're going to $250,000 budget. They're getting actors in, like you have John Marley playing the dad, who was in The Godfather, for goodness sake. And you had Lynn Carlin, who was a well-known actress. Apparently, though, the most popular on set was Henderson Forsyth, who plays the doctor, because he was in like a really popular TV soap opera at the time. So Bob and Alan said whenever they filmed any scenes with Henderson Forsyth, a crowd would turn up to watch, you know, because he was such a celebrity of the time. I think the best scene in the film for me personally is when Richard Backus, or Andy, turns up at his surgery at night, and you have this stalking sequence. Really, it's not a quick kill by any stretch of the imagination. He's stalked, and then Andy comes up with this fantastic line saying, I died for you, Doc. You need to return the favor. As in, I went to Vietnam and I died the country, sort of thing, you know. And I just think it's a great scene. Alan Ormsby turns up then, if you've spotted him, as like a bystander when the body's being taken out of the thing. And Bob's in it as well. He turns up as a
and
police
Jeff
officer.
Gillen.
Yeah, police officer at the end. That was a scene that was cut. I don't know if you've ever seen the extras and stuff like that, because the original ending of it, or one of the endings they got rid of, was the police car like bursts into flames at the end. There's this huge explosion. Goodness knows why they wanted to do that in the first place, but that's not in the final. The print you probably see if you buy it on Blu-ray or whatever, but it's there as a deleted scene, I think. You still had people in there, so like Anya Ormsby, Jane Daly, I think, who was in Children. She was like worked at the flower shop in the film, you know, so they were still using Carl Zitra, you know, they were still using this group that they had, but they were able to give it a bit more polish because they had a bit more money to spend, I suppose, really. It was filmed in a town called Brooksville in Florida. So the cemetery was for real. All the locations were for real. Yes, as I touched on earlier, of course, one of the big things that you have to mention when you talk about Deathdream is Tom Savini, because this was his first film that he sort of worked on. And again, that was a strange story how that came about, that Forrest Carpenter, who was just one of the crew on Children and then Deathdream, went into a diner. He was quite a character, this Forrest Carpenter guy, with like an Indiana Jones hat, was how Tom Savini described him. But just sort of I got chatting to Tom Savini and was like, oh, what are you doing? Well, we're here actually making a film called Dead of Night. And what do you do, Tom? Oh, well, I do theatre effects, illusions. And I was a photographer in Vietnam. And he's like, oh, you do makeup effects, do you? And Tom just happened to have binders in his car boot with all these photos of like makeup that he'd done. And so Forrest was like, well, hang on, do you want to just come and work on this film with us? You can help Alan Ormsby with the makeup effects. And as they say, the rest is history. It went from there because then Tom worked on Deranged and then became the absolute legend that he is.
The one thing that always makes me curious about that story, and I heard it and read it a few times, is why he was in Florida.
I think he was doing some theatre stuff or school stuff, and like he would tour around doing these little shows, wouldn't he? I think came up again when there was that Tom Savini documentary not so long ago, wasn't there, where it gets mentioned. I think we just have to chalk it up as a happy coincidence.
Yeah, that's
because it's
amazing.
Like, well, if he didn't meet that guy in a diner and then hadn't worked with Bob Clark and Alan on Deathdream, would he have even become the Tom Savini we know? Who knows? Good chance it wouldn't have happened. Deathdream is such an underappreciated is the wrong word because it bugs me when people say underappreciated. I always prefer underseen.
Yes.
Because I think the people who have seen Deathdream love it, and know how good it is. It's just not enough people have seen it. That's the thing. And Deathdream was, again, a one that had a poor release. It actually had a world premiere, incredibly, in Tampa in August 74, and John Marley was there, and so that was quite a glitzy thing. It must have been amazing for Bob Clark, to have this premiere. But again, it just never went anywhere. It didn't succeed. It didn't make money. It didn't even play in New York until 2000, when it was shown at this festival. With what about this film that never made it here? But then suddenly we have the beauty of VHS, DVD, and Blu-ray, and suddenly people start to appreciate it. Still not enough. People always talk about Night of the Living Dead and the allegories and Romero with his political statements through horror films. And it's like, well, you'd be hard pushed to find one that gives you as much political statement as Deathdream. I think you really would. And the ending is incredible. I don't want to spoil these things just in case people haven't seen it. The ending is a real about turn. You feel sorry for the person who's meant to be the villain in the film. And it's effective because of that. It's just a great, great film. Again, I wish people would talk about it more. One of my prized possessions is I actually have the drive-in one sheet for Dead of Night, which is this effective blue and yellow poster, one of these. If you're not in for the first 10 minutes, we're not letting you in. I love it. And I just hope over the years, hopefully it'll pick up more of an audience somewhere. I think it's streaming probably at the moment, isn't it? Somewhere. I imagine it's probably on.
Yeah. Last time I watched it, it was on Tubi, which is sort of a great free service here. And I don't know if you guys have it over there. But
it doesn't exist over here, unfortunately. Not that I'm aware of anyway.
It's free with ads, but they get a really great selection of horror films. And I believe that Children and Deathdream are both on there. That's where I watched them last. It's interesting because this was one of the first films to honestly portray the trauma of the Vietnam War, but it kind of goes back to the whole Twilight Zone thing. You can wrap it in a fantasy story, either sci-fi or horror, and get it put out there. And the subtext, it's definitely there. And obviously it was intended to be there. This isn't sort of a happenstance thing where maybe it was a World War II story instead to represent Vietnam. No, this kid was in Vietnam, got killed there, came back. He's basically addicted, as many of them were when they came back. So you have all that. It's all there. But also it's a really intelligent horror movie. And I think that's the thing that kind of threw me off the first time I watched it. It wasn't an immediate favorite of mine. I think it had something to do with the fact that it was intelligently made.
It's very subtle, isn't it? I mean, it's only really when you get Andy really starts deteriorating, and then they have that crazy scene at the drive-in theater in the cars where it starts to suddenly oh, right, now we're into a bit of exploitation here. But before that, it's so almost kitchen sink drama at times, you know, with the mother and the father arguing about how do we deal with him, what's happened to him, the girlfriend who I don't even recognize you anymore. Who is this that's come back? You know, that's sort of that's what I mean. You can watch it however you want to watch it. That's what's great. And, you know, Bob and Alan were both very open about that, you know, and they said they weren't criticizing the soldiers that had gone to Vietnam at all. They were criticizing the war. They had nothing against the soldiers because they thought how they'd been treated was disgraceful. But it was the war they had a problem with. But they didn't want to bash you over the head with it. It was clearly there if you wanted to see it. But if you just wanted to see a horror film about a guy who comes back and basically has to inject himself with blood to stay alive, you can watch as that. I love Deathdream. I love recommending Deathdream to people. Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, you can argue, is a bit more of an acquired taste. So there's certain people I could give Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things to, and I think, well, they might even turn off in that first hour because they're expecting this zombie apocalypse. Whereas Deathdream, I love showing it to people, you know, just saying, right, what did you think of that then? They're like stunned by it. I said a lot of the time. I'm glad we're talking about it now, Mark, because if it means one other person goes and watches it and digs it up somewhere, then brilliant.
Because that's sort of the whole point of doing all this and giving attention to, like you said, I think 3 underseen movies. And it's curious because I've known about them for decades, and that was really only because of the Psychotronic Encyclopedia film.
Okay, yeah.
They weren't available to me. They were on my watch list for years. It's been nice the last 10 years or so to actually have been able to watch them. And
it's amazing, isn't it, when you can suddenly see these films that you just heard about in the mists of time, and then suddenly they're getting some 4K Blu-ray release. I mean, it's an amazing time to be a horror fan. You know, regardless of what genre or directors or films you like, it's just incredible time that you're, you know, I mean, yeah, the children version I've got that I sat and watched last night is in HD. This is a film that played drive-ins in 1972, and suddenly you're watching it on pristine. Sometimes that detracts from the drive-in element of films. You know, sometimes you want that grindhouse feel for a film, don't you? But it's still amazing that they're getting this treatment, you know, from these companies, the Arrows, the Vinegar Syndromes, the Severin. Long may that continue.
I don't have any troubles at all, Dad.
Greetings. Are you a fan of monsters, galactic misfits, and mutant weirdos? Are you a collector or an enthusiast? Do you like toy photography, dioramas, Masters of the Universe, or Star Wars? If so, I encourage you to follow Skelevator on YouTube, Instagram, and or Facebook. Just type Skelevator, SKELE space VADER, Skelevator, into your YouTube, IG, or Facebook search engines, and you'll find me. Join the geeky freakout today. Become a friend of Skelevator.
You still want to go to the drive-in?
What's playing?
Who watches? Right, Andy?
Right, Bob.
That's the Andy I used to know.
Thanks once again to Simon for speaking to me about these films. I will be releasing the full interview as a separate track. Well, not to harp too much on the Martin connections, but just even the use of the syringe in both. That was, I think, the first thing that made me think of that. But then you do have that bit of family drama in Martin, and you have Tom Savini as a connection, and Martin may have been the next film that he worked on after this. But it's always a surprise to me that this was the first film that he ever worked on, because you only ever hear him associated with Romero as far as Martin, then Dawn of the Dead, the big one, and then, of course, it's just slashers and everything else under the sun after that.
The way that this film and Martin depict these lonely, disenfranchised to some degree young men who are supposed to want to have this particular role in the world, and have these very specific social cues they're supposed to follow. They either can't or don't want to, and the look at how alienating that is makes movies like this so much more impactful than like those 80s serial killer movies where it's a similar thing, where it starts out with this guy who's just rejected and he doesn't fit in, and maybe he had an abusive upbringing. Like something like Don't Go in the House or Maniac come across as so different, even though I think those films do also have, to a degree, sympathetic protagonists who are shown to be victims of urban life and blah, blah, blah. And the world around them is awful. But here, there's just something so sad about it.
You can picture there being thousands of Andys coming back to their homes.
Yes. I think maybe that's what it is we never really got to know what Andy was like before, so we shouldn't really have an emotional connection to him. But I think because he has that like everyman quality, which usually annoys me in storytelling, I think it works so well here because it doesn't matter what he was like before, because it's just clear to him and to everyone watching, if not to his family, that he's just wrong and he shouldn't be back.
I hadn't really thought about what Andy was necessarily before the last few times I watched it, but having that Martin idea in my head, I picked up on a couple of lines of his where it almost made it seem more like vampire lore than zombie lore. So when he follows the doctor to his office, he says,
"You invited me, Doc, remember?"
Of course, that's the big vampire trope of having to be invited in. But I had always just assumed, when a dead body comes back, we're talking zombie. Or
whenever I try to describe this to people other than saying, "Oh my God, you have to watch it," it's like, well, it's a zombie movie, but it's not, like, it feels wrong calling it that. I feel like it does, now having watched it for the umpteenth time. It's like his behavior is more like a vampire, except I think we're just not used to seeing vampires decay in movies, aside from times where they're kept away from food or something like that. It's almost like a cross between a vampire and a ghoul, but the way he makes conscious choices to get the blood is so specific and such non-zombie behavior. But that's also what I like about it, is it's not just, oh yes, this is a vampire movie or a werewolf movie. It's so much harder to pin down.
I like, too, that he doesn't have, like, the thirst, oh, I'm so hungry. I like that he doesn't eat, that he doesn't drink, that we don't get that when he goes out to the...
Nothing for me.
Yeah, exactly. Which just kind of, again, is like, okay, well, that's weird. And it's a weird thing. And then it's not like he's like, oh, I crave human flesh or anything like that.
I don't drink wine.
Right. I never drink soda pop.
He tells the doctor,
"Not a living soul in better health than I am. I don't have to worry about getting sick or old, tired or hungry or anything."
Gotta get the...
Oh.
Some of this stuff could be played for laughs. You could see it going in that direction. I'm kind of glad it doesn't. We do get a little bit of that. I think we can say Ormsby humor now, or even Bob Clark humor, with the people in the diner. They're all colorful characters.
Yeah.
In that little scene.
But at least it's at the beginning and not plunked right in the middle where you're like, wait.
It like lulls you into thinking, oh, this is going to have some like quirky horror movie characters. Maybe there's going to be an old man saying, don't go to that camp or something. But nope.
We have a drunk like we did in Deranged, and he's not quite as offensive. But...
He's not as memorable.
No.
Look at them tits. Both of them. I seen tits and I seen tits from Portugal to Yokohama. Now let me tell you, those are tits with a capital T.
I guess it should have a warning. This isn't a feel-good, fun horror movie ride for anyone, but it should be watched.
It could be one of those movies that if you hate your family, or even if you can't see your family on the holidays this year and you just want to feel bad, then just watch Deathdream and Faces.
And Faces. Oh, boy.
Yeah, Cassavetes not really the feel-good filmmaker.
No. Is there anything else we want to talk about?
I'm glad that you brought up the deputy with the blinds, because I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about that a-hole. That guy's great.
Well, and it seems to especially trigger John Marley, which, it is annoying, but I think he's on the verge of having some kind of breakdown, and the sound is just so similar to Andy's rocking that it's like enough of a subtle reminder that he looks like he's about to open fire in the police station.
We see from the beginning when Andy first comes home, the dad pulls the gun out of the dresser drawer, and so we have a nice little Chekhov's gun there, and it does come into play later, and the disintegration of the family is just so gut-wrenching, but it's kind of appealing in a way to see that happen throughout the film where not a lot else happens, really. We don't get him going out every night and attacking random people in the streets or breaking into women's homes like Martin does. It's a lot of him in a rocking chair on the lawn or up in the room. We get so much more of how that affects the family, which is what happens to soldiers that return home, and no one knows how to act around them, and they don't know how to act in society anymore. The other kind of comic relief is that postman, when he first shows up, he's telling all these stories about World War II.
You know how he got his war wound? And him going around bragging like some damn war hero? You know what it was? Some crowd shot him in the ass. Right, plumb in the old pucker.
It's just another one of those subtle little jabs that Ormsby puts in there. Like, this is a totally different war. I can't think of another Vietnam movie that came out this early that dealt with the realities of the war.
So you're saying you don't think Rambo is realistic?
I've only seen First Blood. I haven't seen any of the other ones.
That's pretty good. I mean, because First Blood is so much better than any of the rest of them.
They're still fun, but First Blood is great.
First Blood is, that gets you in the feels.
Well, First Blood is Ted Kotcheff, right?
Right.
So
you could do a double feature of this and First Blood and get kind of a different.
There's a really interesting Vietnam film called Captain Milkshake, which is personally I hate the title, but from 1970, which was really interesting, where it was, I think all the Vietnam footage is color and the footage back at home is all shot in black and white. And the guy comes back from the war and he keeps having flashes of what the war was like. And he ends up getting involved with hippies and commune life and these kind of things. And just seeing like how out of touch the American anti-war effort was compared to like what it was really like being in Vietnam. It's a really good film. It's by Richard Crawford, and it was unavailable for a lot of years, but I think you can still get it through CaptainMilkshake.com. Really good film, and I got to interview Crawford years ago, and he tells some amazing stories about how he was pitching the movie to Francis Ford Coppola at Zoetrope. Zoetrope almost made it, and then it's kind of funny that Francis ended up doing Apocalypse Now 8 years later, or 6 years later. I guess it was 8 years by the time it finally came out.
That sounds awesome. It also is making me think a little bit of Ninth Configuration, which is, I think, another just so amazing movie about how the war, especially the Vietnam War, that purposeless violence makes people crazy and makes them not themselves.
The only thing that kept popping into my head, and I haven't seen it in years, and I don't think it takes place during Vietnam, is Johnny Got His Gun, and just how kind of overwhelmingly depressing and dreadful that film is. And
I don't think I know that one.
That's the one that Metallica used clips from One. It's the Douglas Trumbo, I think, is the writer.
Okay. Dalton Trumbo,
Dalton Trumbo, sorry.
Donald Sutherland plays Jesus, and Timothy Bottoms is the lead.
And Jason Robards is his father, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'll watch anything with Donald Sutherland, so.
Especially playing Jesus.
Yeah. Boy, talk about a double feature. Oof. Might not make it through the night. I forgot to mention this on the Deranged episode, and I think it's a bit of a stretch, but since we're talking about the Vietnam stuff.
What was that?
I'm not sure.
Oh.
I don't see a notification on here.
I didn't hear anything.
Oh, that was weird.
That was wild.
Huh.
The last time I watched Deranged, I kept thinking of the narrator as one of those news reporters that would be in the middle of this shit during the Vietnam War when they would send that stuff back and show it on the news, and like how it doesn't quite work because he is basically presenting the film as a documentary.
It makes me think of those Mondo movies.
I can see that, yeah.
So it's kind of a stretch, but I was thinking, well, Ormsby seems to have some issues with the war, so maybe that was a nod to that. I did want to talk about the end. We get hectic towards the end there with the dad returning home and finding out that Andy is out on the double date with Joanne and his sister and Bob, and his drive through the town to find them, and the attack at the drive-in. I love it when there's attacks at drive-ins, for one thing. That's always kind of fun to see.
Oh, and that guy just bites it. I really thought that it was effective dummy work when he runs over the guy.
They cut it just at the right time so you couldn't see the top of the dummy.
Great.
The legs looked pretty realistic. That good, solid, low-budget filmmaking. And then the drive back through town with Andy and his mom, and that car just being in flames. And
what a great visual.
Harrowing.
It's like Christine in reverse, you know, where the flames are coming out the back instead of out the front.
And the fact that she thinks they're going on the run while he's decaying, but he's like, no, I just want to lay in my grave. Like, oh.
Well, and it's so cool, too, that they actually... So I don't know if they actually exploded the car or not, but there's definitely another explosion when they're there at the graveyard. And I'm like, they didn't have to do that. Like, the explosion that happens during the very opening footage, I kept watching it and I was like, how many explosions are there? Is there just one that they're shooting from different angles? Is it two? And I'm just like very conscious because the very opening looks kind of like low budget filmmaking, which it is. And then at the end, when that explosion happens, I was like, wait, was that really the car? Did they just really blow up the car? And you can't even see it. It's like when Marley kills himself, like you just hear a sound effect. And with that, though, you hear the sound effect, you see the fireball, and I'm like, God, did they actually just blow up that car? That's pretty bitchin' if they did. And if not, they really pulled it off well that I think that they blew up a car.
Thought about the opening. I was like, yeah, you know, for low budget, this is pretty right on, other than the flora being wrong for Vietnam, but, and probably the uniforms. But I don't really.
Yeah,
I'm not going to go to IMDb and put in the goofs. You know, these were World War II era uniforms that wouldn't have been worn by a.
Right.
When I talked to Simon, it sounds like we all watched the same cut then, because every time I've seen it, there's been the car explosion and there's been her last line, and I guess that's not true of every release of the film, that explosion. And
Andy's home. Some boys never come home.
Is cut out because they thought it was a little bit too on the nose. I don't mind stuff being on the nose sometimes when it has an emotional pull to it. I know that they did cut some stuff out of his walk through the town earlier on when he visits the cemetery, and when he looks at Joanne through the window, he passes by a veteran's home and sees blind vet on the porch. And even that, I'm thinking, well, that could have been fine. None of these films, these three early films, make it over 90 minutes. I don't know. Give me a minute or two more, I'd probably be fine as far as the runtime goes. I think that's pretty impressive. They crash through those gates, and then a couple of minutes later, naturally, the car explodes. Adds a little bit of pizzazz to your low-budget film to have stuff blow up.
Definitely.
I want it to end with a big explosion.
And it ends on a very touching note, and that's true to the rest of the film, where we're dealing with a lot of really heavy stuff and big emotions and a really messed up family.
If it hadn't been for you, he wouldn't have enlisted in the first
He
place.
enlisted because he didn't want you to turn him into a goddamn mama's boy.
Thanks to Mike for being a guest on this whole series. What is going on the Projection Booth podcast in the month of December?
Well, Mark, you should know because you're going to be on the Projection Booth in December. We're going to be talking about Black Christmas, very holiday appropriate film. It's kind of a weird grab bag month of movies because we're talking about a couple movies from '99, talking about Fight Club and The Matrix, a couple, very proto-men's rights films, oddly, for whatever reason. We're also talking about gender more with just one of the guys from the 1980s.
Oh,
and
I love that movie.
It's so great. And then we're going to wrap things up with one of the best movies ever made, Flash Gordon. So that should be one heck of a month. All over the place, no real themes, but it's going to be a lot of fun.
I hope you got an interview with Billy Jacoby.
I did not. Just Lisa Gottlieb, that's all. So I'm sorry.
I'll still listen.
I tried for so many people, and I even had one person who was just like, yeah, that sounds great. And then every time I'm like, so when can we set that up? And I never got a response back. So, yep.
And Sam, I think since the last time you were on the show, you have a new podcast out, Twitch the Death Nerve, which everyone should check out. And you co-host that with
Charles and John. And if you heard any noise just now, it was Charles's cat deciding that she needed to sharpen her claws. In December, we are going to have a spaghetti western episode. I will leave the title a mystery for now. And we will also have a multi-part episode on our favorite psychotronic Christmas movies, sort of the 12 Days of Christmas. And we will also be talking about Black Christmas. I'm probably not supposed to be saying that, but I'm telling you.
Ooh, fighting podcasts. I love it.
Dueling Black Christmas episodes. Oh, man.
And I thought I was the only podcast to ever cover Black Christmas, ever.
The only one.
Ever.
And I've already done it on my shows, so.
And I should also say, since the news is still pretty recent, for the Vinegar Syndrome Big Black Friday announcement, I contributed commentaries to the Flesh for Frankenstein release they're doing and Ebola Syndrome. Pick up both of those two totally wild films, both of them filled with viscera.
Thank you again to you two for being on the show. Thanks to everyone for listening. If you want to help support Wake Up Heavy, go buy something at TeePublic. They're probably having a sale right now. Since it's the end of the year and people might be feeling generous, I could use some cash so I can up the ante here and get a Zoom account so I don't have to keep using Skype.
Yeah, it's really a sad story. Mark bought all these combs for his wife, and she sold her hair, and then she bought him a watch fob, and he had to end up selling his watch.
Thanks for listening, everybody, and don't forget.
Don't forget what?
Yeah, don't forget what?
Don't forget to check out the other 2 episodes of this series on Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things and Deranged. And don't forget...
Anything can happen when you wake up heavy.
I died for you, Doc.
Hey, this is Jason Kleberg from the Force 5 podcast, a show that forces a guest to come up with a movie-themed top 5 list topic, and then we reveal our picks on air. Top 5 heist films, top 5 tearjerkers, top 5 movie dogs. Every show you'll be asking yourself, what would be on my list? Guests include directors, screenwriters, actors, podcasters, musicians, authors, and even a professional wrestler. Subscribe to the Force 5 podcast, and you won't just be a listener, you'll be a list nerd. The Force 5 podcast, available wherever you're listening now.